At our divorce hearing, he laughed. She'll leave with nothing. I stayed quiet until the judge read the secret clause I added last night. His face turned pale in seconds. I can still hear the sound of his laugh echoing in the cold, sterile courtroom, the way it felt like it was mocking everything I had endured. It was supposed to be a relief, finally, the end of the years of manipulation, the fights, the silence that hung in the air of our home like an oppressive cloud. But I didn't feel relief. I felt nothing, actually. I think I had been numb for so long that I wasn't sure I could feel anymore. I wasn't the woman who walked into this room a year ago, terrified of losing everything. I had walked in here confident because for once I had a plan of my own. I'd given him everything, my trust, my years, my devotion. And what did I get in return? Nothing. He would have left me with nothing, and I knew it. I knew it in my bones before he even opened his mouth. The emptiness that had been building for months, maybe even years, suddenly felt like it had a name. It was the kind of emptiness that fills up every crevice of your being, and you don't know where it came from, but you know it's been there all along. Growing building. It wasn't just about him. It was about me too. What had I become? What had I allowed to happen? I wasn't this person, the one who quietly sat there while my life was being decided for me. The one who swallowed every insult, every betrayal, and kept pretending like I was strong, like it didn't hurt. But it did. The scars were all over me. I could feel them on my skin, under my ribs, in the hollow of my chest where my heart used to be. My mother used to tell me as a little girl that women were meant to be strong, that we had to bear the weight of the world, even when it felt unbearable. She'd say it like it was a badge of honor, like being a woman was about surviving everything life threw at you and keeping your head held high. I remember when I was young watching her do it, watching her hide her tears, bury her anger, and put on a smile for everyone else while the world slowly broke her down. I grew up with that expectation to be strong, to keep everything inside, to never let anyone see me crumble. So I didn't. I kept it all buried deep, until one day I couldn't anymore. I thought I had built a life with him, a life that was safe, predictable, the dream everyone told me I should want. I thought he was the person I was supposed to lean on, but I didn't realize how much of me I had lost in that marriage, how much of me I had given up. I had been so blinded by the need to please him, to keep the peace, that I forgot about myself. And when I woke up and realized it, it was too late. The damage was done. When he laughed that day in court, I didn't react. I just let the silence hang in the air. Because in that silence I could feel the truth that he had underestimated me. He thought I would back down, thought I would give in like I always had. But I didn't. I wasn't that woman anymore. And for the first time in years I could finally breathe. But it wasn't freedom. Not yet. The truth had come out in that courtroom, and it was like peeling off a scab that had been hiding an open wound. The clause that had been hidden, buried until now, was a lifeline. But it was more than that. It was a declaration. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a sign that I wasn't powerless anymore. I had taken control of something, even if it was just for a moment. I looked at his face, pale and silent now, and something inside me shifted. I didn't know if I could truly take back everything he had taken from me, but I knew I wasn't going to let him have the last laugh. Not this time. As we walked out of that courtroom, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel anything at all, really. I felt like I was walking through a fog, unsure of where the path was taking me, but knowing for the first time that I had a choice. For so long, I had been nothing but a passenger in my own life, letting him steer us, letting everyone else decide what I should be, what I should do. But now I wasn't sure where to go next. I wasn't sure who I was anymore. I looked at my phone as I walked into the cold air outside. The text from my lawyer lighting up the screen. You did it. But be careful. This isn't over. I stared at the words, the weight of them sinking into my chest. I wasn't sure if I was ready for what was coming next. But I knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. The wind that night carried the scent of rain, heavy and thick, like it had been waiting for something to break open. The kind of night where the earth feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable. I was walking, almost aimlessly, through the quiet streets when I felt the weight of the text from my lawyer pressing against my chest. This isn't over. I couldn't shake it off, no matter how much I tried to convince myself that the courtroom victory meant something, that it meant I was free. Free from him, free from everything he had made me become. But the truth was I didn't feel free. I felt lost. My feet seemed to follow some invisible path, not really thinking, just moving. The world outside felt so distant, like I had stepped out of my life and into another one. And then I saw her, my mother, standing at the corner of the street, just outside her apartment building, her face hidden under the brim of her old hat, the one she wore to church every Sunday. She never came out to meet me anymore, and certainly never after I left him. I hadn't spoken to her in weeks, not since I moved into the tiny apartment where I now lived, the place that smelled like new paint and sadness. I don't even know why I was surprised to see her. Maybe somewhere deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before she would come looking for me, like she always did, whenever I tried to escape. I stopped in my tracks, the air thickening between us like it always did when we were in the same space, that unspoken tension, like we both had so much to say but could never find the words. She looked at me for a long moment before she spoke, her voice shaking as if it hadn't been used in years. "You're doing it again." Her words hung in the air, sharp and accusing. I could feel them cut through the silence like a knife. "I'm just trying to move on," I said, my own voice almost foreign to me. There was something brittle about it, like I was holding 1,000 pieces of myself together, and one wrong move could make it all fall apart. Her gaze softened for a second, but it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. "You think you're the only one who's been hurt, don't you?" Her voice cracked like the breaking of glass, jagged and painful. "You think you're the victim, but you're not. You never were." I recoiled. The words felt like a slap, even though I wasn't sure what they meant. What did she mean? I wanted to scream at her, tell her she was wrong, but I just stood there, frozen. My mother, the one person I thought I could rely on, the one person who had always told me I was strong, that I could survive anything, was looking at me like I was the problem. And it hit me. For the first time I realized she wasn't just disappointed in me. She was scared of me. She was scared of what I had become. I thought back to my childhood, to the moments I had buried so deep that I had almost forgotten them. Like the nights she would sit at the kitchen table, staring at the bills she couldn't pay, her hands shaking as she tried to keep it all together for us. I had watched her struggle, but I had never seen her break. She never told me about the man who had left us, or about the secrets she had kept, the things she had done just to keep food on the table. But now, standing in front of me, I saw her for the first time as a woman who had sacrificed everything for the illusion of strength, for the illusion that I wouldn't see her crumble. I wanted to ask her about it, about everything she had hidden from me, but the words wouldn't come, and maybe deep down I was too afraid to hear them. So I just walked away, not knowing where I was going or why I felt this cold emptiness settling in my bones. I didn't talk to her again. Not for days. I couldn't. And then there was him. My ex-husband, always lingering in the back of my mind like a shadow I couldn't shake. I thought the court case was the end, but it wasn't. He kept calling, texting, trying to manipulate me into believing that things were still salvageable, that we could work it out, that we could fix everything. I ignored his calls at first, but then something inside me snapped. One night I picked up. I wish I hadn't. His voice on the other end was smooth, like nothing had changed. "I know what you did," he said, his voice colder than I had ever heard it. "You think you've won, but you haven't. You're still mine. And I'll make sure you never forget it." I was frozen. The words didn't make sense, but I could hear the darkness in his tone. Something I had missed before. Something I had refused to acknowledge. He wasn't afraid of me. He was more dangerous than I had ever realized. And that was when I began to wonder if the person I thought I had married had ever really existed. Was he always like this? Was I so blind? My mind was racing now, the pieces of everything I thought I knew falling apart, scattering on the floor like broken glass. My thoughts were like a tangled mess, and every time I tried to pull them apart, something new made it worse. And just when I thought I had hit rock bottom, I found the letter. It was hidden in the back of my dresser drawer, tucked underneath a pile of old receipts and forgotten memories. My heart skipped a beat when I saw it. A letter with my name on it, written in handwriting I didn't recognize. My hands were shaking as I tore it open, the paper crinkling under my fingers. And that's when I saw it, the truth. The thing I had feared most. Confession. A betrayal so deep that it made everything else feel like a lie. I couldn't breathe. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, reading those words over and over, each sentence unraveling something I didn't want to know. And that's when it hit me. The world wasn't what it seemed. All these years I had been blaming him, blaming everyone else for what had happened, but I was the one who had been blind all along. The people I trusted, the ones I thought I could count on, had been hiding their truths from me, building a world of lies, and I had never seen it. But now there was no turning back. Everything was changing, and nothing would ever be the same again. I felt the shift in my bones before I could even admit it to myself. It was a quiet thing, a whisper in the back of my mind, something cold and sharp that began to grow with each passing day. The letter had broken something inside me, something fragile I had been holding onto for so long, but it also lit a fire I didn't know I had. And once that fire caught, there was no stopping it. I wasn't just the victim anymore. I wasn't helpless or afraid. I was beginning to understand the true power of what I had been given, the power of knowledge, the power of silence, the power of waiting. They thought they had me pinned, thought they had broken me into submission, but they didn't know what I was capable of when I stopped feeling sorry for myself. I started to see the world through a different lens, one that was sharp, calculating, and cold. Every conversation felt like a game. Every glance, every word, a piece of a puzzle I had to put together. My mother, I realized, had known all along. I was just too blind to see it. She had never been the naive, grieving woman I thought she was. She had been complicit in my father's disappearance, in everything that had gone wrong in our lives. She knew the truth about him, about the lies he had told, the things he had hidden. She had been protecting him all this time, protecting a man who had never loved her, a man who had been playing a game of his own. And when I confronted her, it wasn't anger that I felt. It wasn't even betrayal. It was a quiet, heavy sadness, the kind you feel when you realize your entire world has been built on a lie. She didn't apologize. She didn't even try to justify her actions. She simply looked at me, her eyes empty, and said, "You'll understand one day." I didn't want to understand. I wanted to burn it all down, to make them feel what I had felt. But I didn't say anything. Not yet. Not until I was ready. I began to pull away from everyone, from everything. My friends, the people I thought cared about me, they all seemed like strangers now. I started to notice things I had missed before. Little signs of betrayal, small lies told in passing, promises broken without a second thought. My best friend, the one I had trusted with everything, started to drift away. First it was subtle. Texts unanswered, invitations ignored. But then one night I found the phone. Her phone. Left carelessly on the table, as though it was meant to be found. And when I saw the messages, the ones she had been hiding from me, the ones that tied her to him, to my ex-husband, to the man who had taken everything from me, something snapped inside me. It was like the last straw had been placed on a fragile pile, and I could feel the weight of it breaking everything down. She wasn't just a friend. She had been his ally all along. The truth hit me like a slap in the face. I had been so focused on him, on the betrayal of my marriage, that I hadn't even seen the people closest to me turning against me. My whole life had been a series of lies, and I had been too busy trying to live up to some fantasy to notice. But now I saw it all clearly, and I was done pretending. I started to make plans. Not in the obvious way, not in some reckless emotional outburst. No, I began to observe, to learn. I started tracking his movements, his calls, the small things that seemed insignificant but could hold the key to everything. I had nothing left to lose, and that made me dangerous. The power of nothingness is a force few people understand. I remember the first time I saw him after everything fell apart. It wasn't a confrontation, not at first. I had been waiting for the right moment, watching him, listening to his every word, every shift in his body language. He had no idea I knew what I knew. He still thought he had control, that he could play me like a puppet. But the moment he looked at me, really looked at me, I saw something in his eyes. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even surprise. It was something darker, something more dangerous. I didn't say anything. I just smiled. A smile that wasn't meant to comfort him, but to remind him of one thing. He had underestimated me. I walked away, feeling the weight of the secret I was holding, the truth I had been keeping locked inside me. It wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. I had started to dig into the past, into the pieces of my life I had buried deep. And that's when I found the real bombshell. A document. hidden in plain sight, disguised as something else, a will, a trust, a contract that would change everything. It was from my father. A document that showed I wasn't just an innocent victim in this mess. I was part of it. My inheritance, my place in the family, had all been preordained by him, by her, by them. They had been controlling my every move long before I even realized it. And now the power had shifted. I wasn't the one being controlled anymore. I was the one pulling the strings. I had all the leverage I needed to bring them down, but I wasn't going to do it recklessly. I was going to make them feel every ounce of what they had made me feel. And when it was done, when the dust had settled, they would all know. I was not the one to be underestimated. This was no longer just about revenge. This was about reclaiming everything they had taken from me. And that's when I stopped being afraid. I thought I had all the pieces in place. I had orchestrated everything so carefully, so deliberately. The lies, the betrayals, the manipulation, they had all played out just as I expected. And as I watched them from the shadows, I felt a strange sense of calm. The moment of truth was near. And I had become someone I hardly recognized anymore. A version of me that wasn't broken, wasn't afraid, wasn't begging for validation or redemption. No, I had become the storm. The final blow was always going to be a moment of reckoning, and I had to make sure it landed with the weight it deserved. I had planned every detail, watched every step, observed their weaknesses, their fears, the cracks in their polished lives. My ex-husband, thinking he was safe, thinking he could still control me with his charming smile and empty promises, had no idea the depths to which I had gone. But it wasn't just about him anymore. It was about everyone who had played their part in my destruction, everyone who had stood by, silent and complicit, while I was being torn apart. My mother, my supposed allies, the friends I thought I could trust, they were all part of the same game. And now they would pay the price. The confrontation happened one evening, under the soft hum of the city lights, a moment frozen in time. I stood before them, my ex-husband and his accomplice, my so-called best friend. The room was thick with tension, the air heavy with everything left unsaid. They thought they were in control, sitting there smug and self-assured, believing that I had nothing left to fight for. But they were wrong. The first words came out slow, deliberate. "Did you really think you could take everything from me?" I asked, my voice steady, cool. My ex's eyes flickered with confusion, then frustration, as if he were struggling to grasp the shift in power. But I knew something he didn't, something that would destroy him. I pulled the document from my bag, the one I had found hidden in my father's office all those months ago. It wasn't just an inheritance agreement. It was the key to the whole game. It was proof of everything, proof that my mother and father had planned it all. They had used me as a pawn, and now I was the one pulling the strings. The truth unraveled in front of them, bit by bit, each word a new layer of betrayal exposed. My ex-friend's face went pale as the details of her involvement came to light. She had been the one who had tipped off my ex-husband about my financial troubles, the one who had been feeding him information about my every move. She wasn't just a bystander. She had been the one orchestrating my downfall from the very beginning. She had known about the divorce clause, had been in on the secret the whole time. Her silence was no longer something I could ignore. She had no excuse. And my ex-husband, the man I thought I could never escape, sat there with his smug grin slowly disappearing, replaced by panic. He had underestimated me, underestimated what I could do when I stopped being afraid. I had waited for this moment, every piece falling into place like a symphony of calculated destruction. The rage I had once felt for him had faded, replaced by something colder, sharper. I didn't need to yell, didn't need to lash out. My silence was the weapon now. They knew they were beaten, and the reality of that hit harder than anything I could have said. The tears started to well up in my ex-husband's eyes, not out of guilt but from fear. Fear that his world was collapsing, that the lies were coming back to claim him. I had no satisfaction in watching it, no pleasure in their downfall. It was necessary. I had never asked for this, but now that it was here, it was the only way to make things right. The final moment came when I handed them a letter. A simple piece of paper, but one that would change everything. It was my father's last words, a confession, an admission of guilt. A letter that confirmed everything I had suspected. He had known what they were doing to me. He had known how they had manipulated me. And he had let it all happen. As they read the words, my mother standing in the back, her face unreadable, I saw it all in their eyes. It was too late for apologies, too late for redemption. They were already lost. And that's when I knew this wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about taking back what had been stolen from me. I walked out of that room, leaving them to their devastation, their brokenness. I didn't need to say anything more. The truth had done its work. As I stepped into the cold night air, something inside me shifted again. I wasn't the same woman I had been when this all began. I wasn't the broken, lost soul searching for validation. I had become someone else. Someone who could stand tall, even in the aftermath of everything. I didn't need to look back. And I didn't need them to understand. This was my moment, my redemption. I didn't know where I would go from here. But I knew one thing. I would never be the same again. I paused, standing on the edge of a new life. A new beginning. The silence hung between us, heavy and full. And then with one last glance back, I turned away. The world behind me was crumbling, but I had found my peace. If you stayed this long, you already know this wasn't just a story. This was a warning. Subscribe. And remember me.